Welcome to Life, Love, Loss. If you like my channel, please subscribe.
It's like a flashback. September. Same exact hospital, same exact room after Theo was born prematurely last year. Familiar feelings of fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. To some, this would be considered a horrible nightmare to replay, and I would say so as well. Especially when I recall the events that felt like they just happened yesterday, ending in our son's loss. The difference is there is a cry. This cry is high-pitched instead of the silent tears I usually shed. Someone is crying, and it's not just me. She is small but mighty, and she knows me as well as I know her, though we haven't met before this. Her name is Fiona, and we've been waiting long and hard for her, which is an understatement once you understand her story. Fiona is our rainbow baby. Just as after a storm, a rainbow often appears across the sky, which brings bright colors and fascination to the people who were fortunate to look up at the perfect time. A rainbow baby is one born after the chaotic and often dramatic loss of a previous baby. Fiona was born on September 23rd via repeat cesarean section at 36 weeks. From the beginning, she has been a tough girl as she held on even when her environment was not supportive of her. Early on in my pregnancy, between 5 to 6 weeks, I was bleeding and visited urgent care twice. We found out my thyroid was so uncontrolled that it was as if I had been off my medication, resulting in levels that were 10 times normal, basically a major risk for pregnancy loss and bleeding. Working frantically with the specialist, I took hefty doses of thyroid medication over the course of 2 to 3 weeks to stop the bleeding and prevent potential mental retardation and poor brain development in our future baby. Thankfully, we overcame this issue. I proceeded to receive highly monitored prenatal care with OB and perinatology every 2 weeks with ultrasounds to monitor for reasons that could explain why Theo was born prematurely. While I appreciated the frequent monitoring, receiving weekly injections in the hip intended to prevent preterm labor contractions was anxiety-producing not only for the pain, but it was a constant reminder of how much longer of the pregnancy was still left. I knew I had to do whatever it takes to protect this pregnancy, even if it meant walking through the OB office, seeing women with their prominent bellies every week, while fearing if I would ever get to their sizes too. Between 21 to 22 weeks, we hit a low point. While all the ultrasounds had been normal up to this point, my cervix, the part of the birth canal that acts as a gate to keep baby safely inside the womb until it is safe to deliver, suddenly shortened to a critical level where the risk of another preterm delivery before 24 weeks was more likely than not. I can recall sitting in the perinatology office, hearing about this finding on the ultrasound and instantly breaking down in tears. Not again, I thought. And this time, I am not even as far along in the pregnancy as I was with Theo. I don't know how I would handle another heartbreak. Why me again? I just want to be a mother. The following day, I had an emergency procedure called a cerclage to stitch the cervix closed and buy as much time for the pregnancy as possible. I was alone because pregnancy during the early part of the COVID-19 pandemic meant that my husband could not join me in any appointments and was not allowed to be a visitor during this procedure, even if it took place in the hospital. So there I was, listening to the perinatologist discuss the details of the procedure and the risks of it being either ineffective or potentially rupturing the amniotic sac. Tears overflowed as I kept listening. That was my breaking point. Rupturing the amniotic sac at that gestational age would most likely mean the end. Any amount of hope I had holding on during each part of this pregnancy would be gone. It was fear like no other. to hear all of that and picturing the worst of the worst, which seems more likely to someone like me who has had her fair share of bad luck. Thankfully, we overcame this as well, and that started my mandatory period of bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy, which was about 3.5 months total. While I had hoped that I would start experiencing some good news again after going through the cerclage and being on bed rest, I knew that this would not be true. Twice I was admitted to the hospital for 4 to 5 days each for preterm contractions at 25 weeks and 29 weeks. Each time the ultrasound would remind us that the only thing keeping baby in is the stitch. Everything was dependent on the stitch, and that did not reassure me. I became more depressed and anxious than this pregnancy had already caused me. You see, pregnancy after loss is a terrible journey. Because of your previous loss, you learn that nothing is guaranteed, even if majority of women can safely have babies. You learn not to trust your body because it seems defective. You learn to doubt every single thing because if there is any chance of a negative outcome, you would likely be in that small percentage of people with bad luck. You learn not to make plans or hope in order to protect your fragile heart. Each time an appointment was made to see the specialist or get an ultrasound done, I always dismissed it as a time point I would likely not get to. When the cesarean section was scheduled 7 weeks in advance, I was so stressed and told myself we would not be able to make it to that point. I was in fear of everything, including straining, constipation, because I was worried pressure would overstress the stitch, causing it to tear. I was terrified of standing upright for more than 30 minutes at a time and remained on bed rest for 22 to 23 hours of the day, which contributed to worsening hip and back pain. On top of this, bed rest with limited ability to do much else allows for more time to think and overthink and to let the negativity in. Thankfully, we overcame this too, even if it meant each day was dragging and the journey felt like it was moving at the pace of a crawl. In the days leading up to Fiona's planned repeat cesarean section, both my husband and I started to allow ourselves to believe that the outcome would be good. We finally set up the essential baby items such as the car seat and crib and started purchasing newborn baby clothes. We finally made plans about maternity and paternity leave and how to approach visitors waiting to see our baby. We finally convinced ourselves that we will be parents caring for a newborn at last. Looking back, I am not sure what it took to keep going when the journey felt so long and hopeless. I know there are countless times I would think of Theo and had mixed feelings. While we are happy to slowly meet each milestone of this pregnancy, for example, getting to viability at 24 weeks, being able to deliver and stay with the baby if delivered at 26 weeks, third trimester at 28 weeks, reaching a safer point to minimize the risk of brain bleeds and periventricular leukomalacia if born less than 1,500 grams or 32 weeks, etc. It also reminded us of what my pregnancy with Theo could not accomplish. I felt guilty while missing Theo, but also had to remind myself to stay as positive as possible for our baby girl. All in all, this pregnancy required physical endurance, but also the emotional strength that I had very little faith in initially. We are, of course, very grateful to have experienced and overcome everything that led us to this point, and we will move forward with raising our daughter while carrying memories of our son with us. She is here at last because her brother is looking after us.